This is the Griffin Podcast, episode number 105. We find ourselves in our buyer plan, and the question on the table is, does your pre-qualification letter help your offer? Are you a home seller or a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property? Or maybe you're an agent who needs a plan to build a better business, but you can't seem to find an easy way to get any of those answers. Well then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of The Griffin and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you're a seller, buyer, or agent, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's Griffin courses.com. Okay, in this episode, we have three major plans at this company: a seller, a buyer, and an agent plan. And we're in the buyer plan, and we're talking about the subject of financing and pre-qualification. The question on the table is, does your pre-qualification letter help your offer? So let's just start off with the context of why we're even talking about a pre-qualification letter. Because as the buyer, when you go out into the field per se, and you start to look at properties and you fall in love with one and you want your buyer agent, which you should have, to help you make an offer, then you have to realize one very important thing. The seller doesn't know you. And even if they do, they don't know you financially. So this is the ground upon which you have to recognize the respect for the seller. They have offered their property for sale to the public. It ends up being a really nice match for you. Don't make assumptions about who they are, how they think, how they'll see you. Don't do that. And ironically, it happens all the time. And look, as human beings, we walk around with all our insecurities, and one of the greatest ones is who we are financially and what we've achieved financially. And the strangest thing in this business happens that we presume that everybody is supposed to know how much money we have or how much money we don't have. And that's ridiculous. So you really have to confront this as something that is, how do you see yourself going into the field as a buyer? Are you insecure about your financial position, or are you reserved and calm? And the other thing is, there are a lot of wealthy people I find that certainly could pay cash for something, and we'll get into that in a later episode, but they never really go through the thought process before they go out looking. And we say that in this buyer plan, that the best thing a buyer representative can do is slow you down and say, look, let's get pre-qualified. Well, I have no problem getting pre-qualified. I do plenty of business with the bank and I have all this cash. That's what I mean about financial insecurity. Great. That's wonderful. We're excited that you have wealth and that you have wherewithal. But again, the seller doesn't know you. Your agent doesn't know you. So play the game so you can win the game. There are rules to this game to make you more competitive. And as a buyer agent, or at least in this case, just consulting you on what to do, whether you use any of our agents or not, the idea is we want you to go through the pre-qualification process for the seller. Because when we take you into later stages of our buyer plan, in the negotiation stage much later on, what we're trying to do is put you in the most competitive position against the competition of other buyers and their agents, especially if the marketplace is really hot and the sellers are in the proverbial catbird seat where they really can dictate how things go down because inventory is scarce. The market is hot, so buyers have to compete with each other. And in a hot market, if you are a buyer, you are definitely going to compete against cash buyers. And when it comes to writing an offer, a cash buyer can avoid or eliminate the need for a mortgage contingency. See, most people that are going to put a mortgage on the property are going to need a mortgage contingency because otherwise they could lose their buyer deposit if they do not get approved for the loan. And by the way, pre-qualification is only the initial stages of pre-approval. A pre-qualification is what a lender or a mortgage broker does when they take the initial look at your financial wherewithal. Typically what they'll do is they will ask you for your tax returns, W-2s, 1099s, all of the things included to make the case for you financially. And then they will also pull your credit score to see if you have a history of paying back loans as would be required with a mortgage. So it's really a pre-qualification process to get the financial house in order for you even to make better decisions in the field. But remembering that if you go through this effort early on and this is presented to a seller and the seller's agent, the listing agent, there's going to be a certain level of understanding that you have been professional in this approach, that this isn't whimsical. So I'm going to double down on this. Nobody is questioning your financial capability, but they're not mind readers. And nobody wants to work hard for you as the buyer on the listing side. They're trying to make a market for that property to get their seller the best financial situation that they can. And that comes with contingencies. See, a lot of people think that just because you offer the best number, that somehow you should win the negotiation. Not true at all. What's most important to a seller is what's most important to them. And you don't really know that unless you have a good savvy buyer agent who can glean some of that information from the listing agent. We will often ask at the Griffin, and we teach our agents, and I execute this plan myself, what's most important to the seller before we write the offer, especially in a hot market. Is there anything that we could do to make the seller's life easier with our offer? And they'll give some guidance. Well, you're up against some cash offers. So the only thing that's going to overcome that is the best possible price you can offer. Okay, so we're going to go do an analysis and we're going to figure that out. And then we're going to look at, are we pre-qualified to chase that property up there? Is it a reasonable situation for the buyer? We have this fiduciary responsibility as the buyer's agent to make sure we educate them fully. And part of that is matching up what they might have to pay to get what they want with their financial capability. So there's a lot going on here. So let's just say we have because this happened to us recently. We had a buyer who was very competitive and her pre-qualification was solid. We knew that she could really perform and we knew she was going to be up against cash offers. So not only did we put a higher offer, but we put an acceleration clause in there and we doubled down by checking with her bank to make sure that she was pre-qualified to do this and that we asked for a pre-qualification letter to prove that she could go up there. Now, she was already well down the road with the bank, so it was easy for the bank to adjust. Now, that's not a pre-approval. So we ended up losing to a cash offer that was a little bit higher than ours, no mortgage contingency, but we competed. So we know with that buyer and a fiduciary and a responsible way to guide them that we competed to the best of what we could do. And the seller was greatly appreciative. I mean, really, the buyer agent, a seller's agent went out of their way to express to us how appreciative they were of how thorough we were with the pre-qualification letter. Without that, it wouldn't even have been a discussion, they said. And the pre-qualification letter also should offer the listing agent the opportunity to pick up the phone and call the banker, the lender, the mortgage broker, whomever it is, that did the pre-qualification. A savvy listing agent who's about to counsel their client to accept the offer should be doing that as well. So you see, nobody's questioning your capability to make you insecure. They're questioning your capability to make sure that if they take it off the market, they've made a good bet on you. Because there's still the process to go through where now you have to go through a home inspection. You have to go through, once that's done, you have to go through an appraisal process for the bank. I just did a high-end property where there were 2 appraisals done. And the deal still fell apart, but at least we knew he was super financially capable of doing this deal. So we weren't questioning him per se. I knew what his background was, but I still needed to see that the money was in order. I mean, you can be super successful in your job title. I don't know how you manage your money. So I need to present that before I say, let's take this off the market, right? So let me summarize it with a key point here. A pre-qualification letter establishes a starting point for trust. Let that really sink in. And today's podcast and the buyer side plan about a pre-qualification letter is more about the seller. I'll get into in a couple episodes going forward here other facets of pre-qualification, but this one is really for the seller. you really want to have gone through a thorough, and a good representative, a good buyer representative tells you to go through this. Slow down. Even if I meet you in the field and you are clearly financially successful, if we're talking about you putting a mortgage on this, even if you have the cash to pay for it, I want to get this pre-qualification letter done quickly from the bank that you do business with, because I need to start by showing professional approach so that I can gain the trust of the listing agent and ultimately the seller. That's the key point there. And again, if you lose out to a cash buyer, understand what was most important to the seller was taking less risk, market risk. So if a market's declining and the seller gets a cash offer and they don't want to take that risk for more money because they think they're going into a softer market, don't get upset that you lost. It just makes sense. If you were them, that is probably what you would do, and I certainly would counsel you to do that. Okay, so a pre-qualification letter is establishing a starting point for trust, because there's still a time period you have to go through to achieve full pre-approval for a loan. Let me summarize it by saying this. One of the most important reasons for going through the pre-qualification process with a lender or a mortgage broker is to establish the beginnings of third-party proof, the bank, that you are financially able to complete a real estate purchase in a reasonable amount of time. That's all it means. The seller will need to know this because they don't know you and have no idea about your financial capabilities. So get a pre-qualification letter to begin to build trust during that negotiation phase. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you're a seller, a buyer, or agent who wants a copy of any of our free step-by-step guided plans, he said, at griffincourses.com, Griffin courses.com. Also, don't forget, of course, if you're interested in these subjects, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We also post our content on YouTube. So don't forget, you can subscribe to the Griffin channel. Big black banner says the Griffin with the cool logo there. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with home sellers, buyers, or real estate agents so they get the help that they need. But remember this, nobody's coming for you. Absolutely nobody. So go get to work on your own plan for buying or selling property or becoming a more successful real estate agent. We'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks.